Hello. I don't think I remember how to do a video before, so this is a rather ambitious one. So thanks to some of my friends who have lent me some of these brushes, I will be able to do a hair comparison of how these different types of hair or hair blends apply makeup. So I already have my foundation on. I'm going to be starting with these two brushes. This is the Hakuhodo J505 on top and the Hakuhodo B505 on bottom. The J is goat and synthetic, and the B is goat and squirrel, blue squirrel specifically. I'm going to be using these two brushes to apply powder and also to apply blush, contour, highlight. So I'm going to start with the goat and squirrel first, and I'm going to be using it to apply a pressed powder because this is a rather dense brush. And then it works really well with pressed powder. And I'm using the Meteorites pressed oolong because they have a little bit of color to them, and as you can see, I'm really pasty. So as you can see, as I'm applying powders throughout my face, you can already see that it's mattifying a little bit. I'm just going in, grabbing powder, and applying it until my skin no longer feels tacky in spots. So once the brush glides effortlessly over every part, I consider that done in terms of powder. So that's the goat and squirrel, that's the B505. Now I'm going to use the goat one. This is synthetic and goat. So the way I'm going to do this video is I'm going to apply and then I'm going to talk about the results. And then, of course, how the brushes feel compared to each other. The reason why I picked the brushes I have for this video is because they're equivalent models. So they're designed to be exactly the same size, shape, and density. The only difference between the brushes is the hair type that's put in them. Okay. So now that that's done, I can talk about the results. So with the squirrel and goat mix, I had to go into the powder to grab a lot more because it is more flexible and it doesn't have as much resilience. As you can see, this one's much firmer, and you could probably able to see it as I was dragging across my face as well. One of them spreads out a lot more than the other. So, and then I can feel it on my face as well, the difference in densities. Another thing that I can feel between using the goat and squirrel mix and the goat and synthetic mix is how heavy the powder feels. This side of my face feels lighter, while this part of my face, I can obviously feel the powder on it. It feels kind of heavier. If you apply powder heavily, you know what I'm talking about. So the goat and synthetic will apply, even though they're meant to be the same exact model, the goat and synthetic, it's going to be denser and feel a lot more per square centimeter or square inch of brush. And of course, the spread is different. That was just for applying powder. And then this 505 is actually meant to be a blush brush. So I'm going to be using them to apply blush, highlight, and then contour right after I clean them off. This is one of those videos that definitely would have been better done as a formal edited video, but I can't be bothered to edit, and if you wait for me to edit a video, that video will never get made. So I'm applying a Hourglass Ambient light blush, and then I'm applying it this way and as well as patting it on to blend. Maybe this will make me look a little bit more human and a little less starkly white. And the reason why I picked this blush is because it's nuanced and it'll be a good demonstration of the way different bristles will give you a different glow and effect, or rather if they show the shimmer more or the matte matrix more. So on camera, it looks vastly different, but in person, the difference is actually less stark. So let's talk about it. With the squirrel and goat, you can see a lot more of that, what I call the matte matrix, the base color showing through. As for this side, it looks lighter because it's picked up and applied a lot more of the shimmery highlight part. So this side of my face looks lighter, even though I've applied the same amount of blush on both sides. And you saw me trying to blend this out earlier, trying to make it appear lighter, but all it did was just make it appear even darker because it took away that shimmer and then just left the matte matrix of the blush. Versus with this brush, if I keep going over it, it will get darker as it applies more pigment, but at some point, the pigment runs out and it's just blending it away. So the goat and synthetic will give you more of the shimmer in the blush if you use a shimmery blush versus a matte blush, while the goat and the squirrel will actually give you more of the matte coat. So I'm going to go in with this brush and fix up this side so I'm not completely unbalanced for the rest of the video. And then because this brush is a stronger blender, I'm going to try to blend it down a little bit. And also just take it across the rest of my face to distribute. Okay. Next, I'm going to be using the blush brushes to apply contour and highlight. I'm just wiping it off on a microfiber cloth in between each use. Obviously, it's not going to remove everything, but it removes enough for me to be happy with it. So let's talk about structure. As you can see, the goat and squirrel holds a point much more readily because it doesn't fluff out as much as the goat plus synthetic does. So it's going to be more precise and supposedly better for contour. So I'm using my usual contour powder, and let's get my mirror. So that's with the B505 and now the J505. I've been meaning to get a haircut in the last 2 months. I just haven't done it yet. I've already scheduled 3 different appointments and had to cancel them all. My hairdresser is probably really angry at me right now. Okay. So as far as applying the contour goes, again, you see a lot more of that matte, the dark color show through with the squirrel plus the goat versus with the synthetic plus the goat. It picks up less of that dark color, and it also blends it out more strongly so it doesn't look as dark. Now let's do highlight. And then I wish I had pure goat, pure squirrel, pure synthetic versions of each brushes to show you, but in a perfect world, that would be great. It's not a perfect world, so I'm making do. Highlight. See there. And highlight. A lot stronger. So if I roll my head from side to side, you can see that one looks lighter than the other because this one's applied it a lot more strongly. Now I'm going to take this one to balance out my face on this side. And in a perfect world, I would also have these brushes in varying densities from very light and fluffy to very dense like the 505s are. So this is a result of applying powder, blush, contour, and highlight with a goat and synthetic brush versus a goat and squirrel brush. Now here's the fun part. We're going to move on to eyes. I'm going to spend a lot of time cleaning my eyes. Let's start with the Sonia G brushes. So we are going to start with the Sonia G Crease 1. This is the current version, which is Saikoho Goat. And then this, I got my hands on a Sonia G Crease 1 in Blue Squirrel, which was the original iteration, but she discontinued the Blue Squirrel version in favor of the Goat. I managed to get my hands on one, and we're going to apply eyeshadow and see how they come out differently. So for this, I've picked this MAC shadow because it has quite a complex finish. So it will allow us to see the full potential of each brush and how it applies stuff differently. So I'm just going to pick up shadow, roll it around on my hand to remove the excess, and then I'm going to apply. Oh yeah, I should have warned you in this video, you're going to be getting uncomfortably close to my face because a lot of it is eye related. Okay. That's the blue squirrel. Now moving on to the goat, we're going to do the same thing. Pick up a bunch of pigment, roll it around, remove the excess, and then applying on the side. All right, so if I back up, you can really see the difference. The goat has applied a lot more pigment, even though I rolled it around in a pan the same, and I rolled it around on the back of my hand to remove the excess the same. And let's just see how much more I have to apply with the squirrel to achieve the same strength of color on my eye to make it match the squirrel, if it'll ever match the squirrel in intensity. Okay, now I'm going to use each brush to blend the crease and the edge. All right. So what I'm looking at is there's a lot more shimmer on the side of the squirrel, and there's more of the matte base color with the side of the goat. Otherwise, the main difference was in how quickly it applied the color between these two brushes. These are meant to be crease brushes, and I don't think most people use shimmering glitter through their crease. But what this tells you is that Squirrel applies color a lot more sheerly than Goat does. So it's much more layerable. So now I'm going to use it with a black shadow this is sort of a matte shadow that comes in a quad. It's a pressed mineral shadow. Move the excess. And we're going to go in again. For what a crease brush is actually supposed to be for, which is darkening up a crease. So I'm just using the tip to kind of color and sketch as if I was doing a smoky eye. I'm also doing this in reverse, so normally you apply all the matte stuff first and then you apply the shimmer on top. All right, so what we're seeing here is actually that the squirrel applied the matte a lot better. The matte powder just slid off the squirrel, and it was a lot easier for me to intensify in the same amount of time with the squirrel than it was for me with the goat. Same amount of product picked up, same amount rolled on the back of the hand to remove excess, but it seems like more of the excess removed on the back of my hand with the goat, and then so if I'm trying to build up to the same intensity with a matte black shadow, it's taking me a lot longer to do it with goat. Also because the goat is kind of blending away the shadow as I go, versus the squirrel, it just deposits it and blends it minimally, whereas the goat will blend it enough that it kind of removes the pigment as you go along. So that's where the overblending can come in. So I think I'm pretty satisfied with how the demonstration between pure squirrel and pure goat in these two brushes go. So I'm going to remove my eye makeup and then move on to the next set of brushes, which is a synthetic squirrel simulant and a goat plus squirrel blend. So in the meantime, feel free to ask your questions. This is going to be a rather long video if you guys haven't already guessed. I'm just using Bioderma on a cotton pad. Okay. So let's talk about the next two brushes while my eyelids are drying from the Bioderma. So this is the Hakuhodo I6451. It's made of this sort of streaky gray material that is meant to be a squirrel simulant. They also have a pure white that's meant to be a goat simulant. This is the G6451. It's a mix of blue squirrel and not Saikoho goat. It's just blue squirrel and goat, since Hakuhodo doesn't specify their goat grades anymore. And there's one function that I really like for the I6451 that you can't do with the G6451. I really love using this for under eye concealer to conceal dark circles or places around the face where I have a blemish, because it just, this shape, density, everything just blends out concealer beautifully. You can't do that with the G because it's made of squirrel. So let's use this to apply, actually let's use it to apply this color. This is Woodstock. So Woodstock is one of those eyeshadows that's really complex, depending on how much you blend it out. So I'm going to apply it to my eye here. And then now I'm going to use just like this to blend. And bring it all the way out here. Okay, that's the first coat of eyeshadow. Same thing here. Lay it down. You can see how much shinier it is already. Use the tip into the socket to blend, and then facing up and out to blend. So I think the clear winner for how densely you want to pack on the pigment is the goat and the squirrel. So here's the difference between the eyes. Going back and forth. So this one, you can see how the dark matrix shows through a lot more versus this one. It didn't really blend once it got to the edges, so it kind of looks all like the same color versus this one. You can see a lot of it. So let's apply more eyeshadow and see if we can eventually get it to look like that. And the answer is no, because it kind of goes on in the same finish wash. I can keep going and it gets closer to it, but obviously it's taking a lot more effort to achieve that same effect, that same dramatic effect as readily. So goat and squirrel versus synthetic squirrel simulant. Let's wipe this off real quick. Ideally, I would have had a pure goat and a pure squirrel one to compare to the squirrel and goat mix as well, but things are not ideal. Let's go with another color. Let's go with this sort of frosty pink and see how it goes. Just applying it to the inner third. And I've re-dipped. There we go. And then with this brush, I haven't had to re-dip to get the same lighting effect with this icy pink. I think the results on this one are pretty obvious. The goat and squirrel apply and leave the shadow on a lot more. But I think that's what makes this Squirrel Simulant brush ideal for concealer and allows it to look really natural. So let's wipe this off again and then move on to the Sonia G Worker 1 and Worker 2. So the Sonia G Worker 1 and Worker 2 are the same brush model, but they have different names. The Worker 1 is the brown one on the bottom that is made of dyed Saikoho goat hair, and the Worker 2 is the one on top, the white one that's made of undyed Saikoho goat hair. It's the same brush in build, size, density, everything. The difference is in the hair type that they have. So let's see. And I've already done a video on my Instagram between these two, but I didn't feel right doing this video without comparing these two. So let's use the glitter. So I'm going to take this one. Move as much excess as I can. And then apply it to my lid. Okay. Now let's take the undyed goat one and do the same. Hopefully I'm not blocking the camera on half of these moves. All right. So the undyed goat one has applied a lot less of the shimmer. You don't see as much of the green reflection. It's applied a lot more of the matte base. You can kind of see the matte base when I turn my hand. It's this patch. It goes from green, it has a matte black base. So it's applied more of that dark base versus this one, the dyed goat hair has applied a lot more of that glitter. So let's clean these off, sort of, and then we're going to apply another eyeshadow with them. We are going to apply the purple. So this purple is another sort of glitter in matte matrix. And I specifically chose this one because of that property. So we're going to apply it down here. And this one is notorious for being patchy. But that's excellent for brush demonstration purposes. So we can see there. And now I'm going to use the brush to try and blend out that patchy bits and see how well this brush does at blending. As you can see, it's kind of just pushing the color around. It just leaves it at the edge. So now let's do it with the undyed goat hair. Okay, so you can see again that the undyed goat hair applies it how should I put it? It applies it a lot more smoother than the dyed goat hair does. And it also applies less than the dyed goat hair does. So I had to spend less time really blending it out. And then the fact that this eyeshadow is really patchy makes that even better, because you can see like the dyed goat hair would just plunk down color in a lot of it, versus the dyed goat hair versus the undyed goat hair was a lot more smooth and gradual in the release of the powder. And as for the blending, let's clean these off as best as I can and really try to blend the edges now with these brushes. So removes a good amount of the color. This is just a microfiber cloth I'm using. I'm just going until it's not really depositing pigment on the towel anymore. Okay, let's blend. You can see, pretty much cleared it up right away pretty nicely. Okay. Now with the dyed, also clears it away. Taking a little less work with the dyed goat hair, which is not surprising to me considering it grabs and holds pigment a lot better. So with a clean brush, the fact that it's a better, or not better, sorry, stronger blender does not surprise me. And then that's that. So let's clean up and then move on to the next set of brushes. Actually, I'm going to use those two brushes to apply the woodwinked. So going back to the worker 1 and worker 2. Oops, that's not worker 2. Just cleaning them off as best I can. This is what these brushes perform like with good eyeshadow. Not that the Bare Mineral ones is all bad, it's just the purple one's particularly bad. And then the MAC shadow is a glitter finish, which is a little more difficult to work with. the MAC green one. It's one of their extra dimensional finishes that's meant to be wet or dry. Okay, so as you can see, the dyed one deposits a lot more. Hence, I got a more dramatic eye right away. And it also just blended out the edges more. So you get more of that dark matte matrix, which makes the eye look more dimensional. Versus this one, it's kind of more even all across. It didn't really take away pigment to give that dimensionality. So then if you want to do a one and done eyeshadow, obviously the dyed one would be better. If you want to do a glossy eye and just put on as much light as possible, the undyed goat would be better. But in the end, the moral of the story is dyed goat hair is going to put a lot more pigment on, and is going to blend stronger. So let's take this off. And the next brushes that I have are round blending brushes. So I have the Hakuhodo 142 in goat and in blue squirrel. And I also have the 141, which is the same model of brush in Kolinsky. That one was a last minute addition because a friend lent it to me. And it's kind of got a different shape from the 142, so I'm not terribly inclined to demonstrate it as well. But since I have it, I figured I might as well show it. Let me show you what I mean by the shapes are kind of all different. So goat fluffs up more than squirrel. So as you can see, the goat doesn't have as fine of a point as the blue squirrel does. Same brush, same diameter, same build, everything. It's just that the goat fluffs up more, so it doesn't have as nice of a point, and it's not as precise. Now, for a brush that really, really holds a point, we have the Kolinsky version, which is slightly longer, but still has the same diameter. I measured with my calipers, and it holds the point a lot better than the squirrel does, and the goat one looks like it almost has no point in comparison to the Kolinsky. So I'm going to start with these two. And I'm going to apply Woodwinked with this. So let's roll it around. Give my eyeballs a few more seconds to dry. And then for this one, I am going to have to roll it in the back of my hand to disperse it. This just gets the color coding more even. Okay. Let's go. And of course, normally you wouldn't use a round brush like this to apply lid color, normally, but we're doing it just so you can see the spread of the brush, you see, as if you were using it as a lid brush. Okay. Alrighty. So as you can see, goat is pretty consistent across. So just like with the worker 2, you get less dimensionality with the goat because as it applies, it blends as it goes. So you kind of get a more even finish all over. Versus with the squirrel, because you spend so little time in each place because the pigment just gets put down and then you move on. It has more dimensionality, especially if I back up like this, you can really see it. And for the matte black shadow, I'm going to clean these off. And then go in and intensify. So let's roll it around. Roll it around in the back. And this is what I do for my eyeshadow application standard, where I roll in a pan and I roll it around the back of my hand. I find that it makes makeup a lot more idiot-proof. Okay, that's the squirrel. Might actually have to pick up more of the black. Okay. I'm going to be a little bit more bold here. So that's the squirrel. And now I'm going to do the same with the goat. Okay, so with this matte black shadow, the goat lays it down a lot more strongly, but it also blends nicely as I'm going along. Versus with the squirrel, it does put it down, but it doesn't put it down as strongly, so I have to pick up a lot more here. But I kind of just dab it on instead of actually applying it and blending it. I kind of go like I'm blending it and then it applies. Difference between squirrel and then goat. Now, just for the heck of it, I'm going to erase this side, the squirrel side, and then compare using the Kolinsky brush. So let's wipe my eyes blank. And give it a few seconds to dry. I know there's probably some esthetician out there screaming right now at the fact that I'm dragging my eye. But for the sake of efficiency. Just taking a clean cotton pad, wiping it dry, and facilitating that drying part a little bit more. Okay, going back in with Woodwinked. And then I'm going to apply. As you can see, I have a pretty sharp line here where that point is kind of stopped tracing the eyeshadow. I'm going to go in and I'm going to try to use a pointed brush to blend. Works about as well as you would have expected. So the Kolinsky is applying a lot more like the goat in that it puts on a lot of the shine and less of the matte matrix. And it's really just glossy all over and doesn't have as much dimension as the squirrel did. Now we're going to go in with the matte black shadow. Roll. And because of that precision point, I'm getting a lot more delineation between the two colors, so I really have to focus on blending with this one a lot more. So pointy and shaped is not always better. It just depends on what you're looking for. So there we go. That's the Kolinsky brush. This is the S141. And this one only applies minimal, this one being the black shadow only applies minimal dimension. I think it's the only black shadow I own for when I'm doing smoky eye. It's pretty foolproof because you really can't overdo it like you can with, what is it? Sugar Pills Bulletproof. Oh boy. I used to have that one, and then I just figured, okay, it's unusable for me. I don't do a heavy black shadow. I just need something to sketch when I do a smoky eye. So now this is the only black matte shadow I own for doing intensification. All right, moving on to the exciting topics that you guys have probably been waiting for. Kolinsky and Sable versus synthetic. So I don't know if you guys can tell right off the bat from just looking at it which one is which. I'll give you guys 5 seconds to guess. And same thing with these two. Which one is the Kolinsky Sable? Which one is the synthetic? Okay, we'll talk about the round ones later. The one on top, the Uemura 10 on top, is the synthetic, and the one below is the Kolinsky Sable. You can see the synthetic one has a little bit of a different build where it's thicker. So let's see what this means for our eyeshadow application. I'm going to be using the synthetic on this side and the natural brush on this side. So going back in, Mac should probably just pay me to do an advert for Woodwinked at this point. And I just turn the brush on its side this way to blend. Okay. And then this is actually a test I haven't done yet myself, so I'm going in blind for this one. Okay, so the obvious results of this one is this one gives you more dimension. So you can see how you have a lot more of that reddish matte russet tone with the natural hair. And then you have a lot more of the gloss and light and the sort of that top coat shimmery color with the synthetic, which is expected because the synthetic doesn't quite have the cuticles to grab and blend powder the same way that the Kolinsky does. But I do have to say they're actually pretty close, and I'm actually kind of impressed. Let's see if I can clean this brush off and use it to blend a little more to get that same russet tone to match. And it's doing pretty well. But as you see, the synthetic does take a little bit more work to achieve the same effect compared to the natural Kolinsky and Sable brush. So let's take that off. And then use it to apply a different color. Let's use it to apply this pink color again. So making sure I'm not mixing up these brushes. This is a 10 on this side. there. For a simple eyeshadow that doesn't have dimensionality, they're actually really comparable. And then in real life, I'm actually seeing more of the pink tone on this side with the synthetic than I am on this side with the Kolinsky Sable. I don't know if that's due to the hair or due to the fact that the synthetic is a little bit thicker. I don't know if it's due to the build or due to the bristle that I see more pink tone on this side than I do on this side. On this side, I'm getting more of the frosty white shimmer, so I see less of the pink tone. That was unexpected. Oh, maybe it is due to the build, because when I was wiping this is the natural. It released a lot less pigment versus this one released a ton of pigment. So I think maybe it was the build of the brush that captured more pigment and just made it look pinker when I applied. So now I'm going to use these brushes with the glitter. You know what? We're just going to go for it all over. Okay. Both sides are actually pretty comparable. The synthetic side has fewer shimmer particles, but it's only because I'm looking up close in the mirror that I can tell. Both sides are pretty close. So now that that's done, I'm going to wipe this off, and then I'm going to grab a cream shadow and then use the cream shadow with both of these brushes. So let's wipe my eyes off first. Those 10 of you who are still here, I'm amazed you're hanging in there. Thank you for staying. I only have one more set of brushes after this Uemura 10. So then if you have any questions, just throw them in the chat box and I will get to them. So while my eyes are drying off, I'm going to clean off these brushes the best I can on this microfiber cloth. And not that much pigment is being released. There's only a hint of a shadow, which means when it picks up the pigment and you put it to your eye, they release onto your eye or your skin pretty well. I have a lot of brushes to wash after this video. Okay, so the cream shadow that I picked is one that's discontinued. The reason why I picked it is because it's duotoned. You can see it's this frosty blue color, but it has the peach highlights. So I picked it to see how well it would reflect that dimensionality onto the eyes. Let's start with the synthetic one. And I'm going to use the back of my hand to warm it up a lot before I apply it to my eye. This is pretty standard whenever I use a cream shadow. I'm just pretty much wiggling it, pressing it to the back of my hand. And the wiggling it also distributes it into my brush. There we go. Now for the other eye. Okay, so with the Kolinsky Sable, even though I tried picking up the same amount of product, it's actually applying less than the synthetic did. So you can see with the synthetic, there's a lot more product and it spreads the product a lot further. So you can see how this is kind of blinked out almost all the way up to my eyebrow, versus this one, it stays much more controlled and close. So I think I actually have to pick up more product with the Kolinsky Sable to achieve the same effect. Warm it up. I'm going to apply through the eye. I can say that the synthetic blends a lot more readily. So you see a lot more of that matte blue side compared to the synthetic one. And synthetic gives a lot more of that golden peachy shimmer, versus the natural hair gives more of the matte undercoat, the base coat. So it looks more dimensional right away. Even though I just applied the same wash of color all over my entire lid, here it blends out a lot more if I just keep going over it. And it turns to that matte base coat of blue. Let's see if I can use this brush over here to achieve the same effect by just going over it and blending the edges until they're remove the shimmer. So the answer seems to be yes, if the eyeshadow hasn't already set yet. So it's turned a little bit more of the matte base coat, but I think this eye has pretty much set. So there we go. That's our comparison for cream shadow. This one's going to be a pain to remove. So the last brushes I have are the Uemura 5Rs. So the one on the right, or sorry, this one is the synthetic one, and this one is the natural one, pure Kolinsky. Again, there's a little bit of a different build with both of these brushes. You can see with the synthetic one that there's a little bit more of a rounded shape to the tip, while the natural one has a more pointy tip. Whether this is due to the fact that even the synthetic one being handmade has a natural variation, or that they had to change the shape slightly to get both brushes to have sort of the same application effect, we'll never really know. Because even with natural brushes of the same model, you get slightly different shapes with each one. So we're going to use both of these brushes just to apply powder shadow. We are going to use Woodwind. So just a synthetic one, rolling it around in the shadow. Then apply. Now we're going to take the other one. I do realize throughout making this whole video that some of the differences that you see may be due to the fact that when you apply eyeshadow on your right eye versus left eye, you hold the brush differently and you also use different motions to do it. So that is one thing that can affect how the color comes out. Okay. So we're seeing a lot more dimensionality with the natural brush versus the synthetic brush. And I do have this one patch of skin here that is annoying and holds more color than the rest. But they're pretty close. So that's actually kind of impressive between the pure Kolinsky and the synthetic. Let's look at it with the terrible purple color. Alright, so the natural Kolinsky brush has applied a lot more of that matte purple base versus the glittery golden. So it shows up darker and intensifies more with the natural brush compared to with the synthetic brush. If I back up, a lot more dimension after I've applied that matte purple shadow here versus here. So thank you for watching. That was a comparison of a lot of brushes, and that was a lot of time. So from the top, the B505 versus the J505 from Hakuhodo. This was used to apply powder, blush, contour, and highlight. This one is pure goat. I'm sorry, this one is goat and squirrel, and this one is goat and synthetic. So main difference was how they feel and how they spread, and the difference was this one applied the blush with more of the matte tone to it, so it looked darker compared to this one. Everything was just glossier and lighter. but also the powder that I applied to set my face felt heavier. I don't think I'm going to go in order. Then there was the Worker 2 and the Worker 1. The Worker 1 is dyed Saikoho goat. The Worker 2 is undyed. So with this one, basically if you want drama and just an easy one and done eyeshadow, the undyed goat will give you a wash, but the dyed goat will give you dimensionality if you use a very dimensional shadow. So if you want a one and done, the dyed goat is better. But if you want maximum glossy impact, the Worker 2 with the undyed goat hair is better. And then as for blending, the dyed goat hair does blend a little stronger versus with the undyed, it's more layerable. You get a little more control over how much pigment you're putting down, where you're putting it down, and how intensely you want it to be on your eye. So that's those two. And for this is the I6451 versus a G6451, all synthetic Simulant of Squirrel and a goat and squirrel brush. So with this one, they almost perform like two different brushes. This one applies a lot more strongly, gives you a lot more of a dimensional finish, and this one applies much more of an even wash all across. However, with this synthetic one, you are able to use it for concealer and liquid cream products versus this one you can't. However, if you're looking for a one and done eye brush, the goat squirrel mix would be it. I still love this one as a concealer brush though. I'm not going to let that one go. Crease 1 versus Crease 1. The original all squirrel Crease 1 versus the goat Crease 1. This one is kind of like the same effect of what we got with these two brushes. So this one applied more of that matte base, and this one applied more glossy all over. So this one gave more dimensional finish right away. Again, if you're using a one and done eyeshadow or trying to keep your routine minimal, the squirrel is better. However, if you're trying to layer, the goat is better because the goat releases it and it's just more layerable and blendable versus the squirrel. It puts it down and it doesn't hold the powder in there in reserve like the goat does. The goat, if you keep going over it, you'll apply more pigment and then it'll intensify versus a squirrel. It kind of just all goes down. So you pretty much have to apply where you want it and then move on. If you keep going over that area, you're going to blend it away. For the goat B142 versus the squirrel 142, again, this one just applied a dimensional shadow with more light and shadow, more of that dimensionality right away. However, the goat one did apply an intensifying matte color more strongly. I had to go into the pan a lot more with the squirrel one to be able to build up a darker outer corner versus with the goat one. I only had to go into the pan once and I just kept going over it and then it just put color on. And for the Kolinsky brush, this one kind of performed like the goat brush on steroids. This is the S141. This is the one I went in blind with and was surprised by. So the synthetic 10 and the Kolinsky 10 don't have as big of a difference as I thought they would. The Kolinsky, the natural Kolinsky one, still does give you more dimensionality and blend faster. Everything's just, I would say, 20% faster with the natural brush. Like I could eventually achieve the same effect I got with the natural brush, with the synthetic brush. It just took more time. Likewise with the 5Rs, the 5R versus the 5R Kolinsky. This one I could eventually get the same effect if I wanted to. I just have to keep going back into the pan and picking up and applying more of that dark color to be able to intensify it to the same amount that the natural brush got me with just one dip into the pan. So hopefully this has been illuminating on the way different eyeshadow brushes apply eyeshadow differently, and as well as face brushes. So I only had one example of that. But this kind of gives you an idea of if you have the same makeup product, if it's a complex makeup product, depending on what brush you use to apply it, you'll get a different finish as well as have different working times. So if you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the comments and I will get to answering them eventually. Thank you for bearing with me. This was a super long video and I will see you guys next time whenever that is. I'm just going to clean up here, and if you guys have anything to throw into the chat, I'll answer that. If not, I'll just clean up and then head out after I fix my eyes. I'm glad I was able to film this video today. This has been sitting in my to-do list since the middle of March. Actually, there's a lot of things that have been sitting in my to-do videos list since the beginning of the year. But this one just seemed like the easiest to do today. I have the Hakuhodo hair comparisons of different hair vintages to do as well. That one's going to be a more involved process. I think I'll do that one as a blog post with a video accompaniment because it's one of those things that's better as a visual that you can scroll through and read versus video where I'm constantly moving things around and you don't really get to look at it. These are all my dirty cotton pads. And then this is just a Hakuhodo microfiber cloth. And then the products I used were, this was a limited edition Guerlain Meteorites pressed. And the reason why I used it was because I'm really pasty right now and I needed some color. And that's why I use that as my pressed setting powder, even though it's technically a finishing powder. It's a setting powder for short term. And then the blush I used was this Mood Exposure by Hourglass because of that highlighter swirled into that darker matte plum base. And if you go back to where I was applying the blush, you can see how differently the two 505s applied that. With the contour and highlighter, it didn't matter as much. Well, with the highlighter, the goat and synthetic one applied it a lot more strongly, so there was a lot more light. And then the squirrel and goat actually applied the contour more darkly, but it was also more difficult to blend it out. And I made the mistake of staying in one place for too long, so then it kind of got too dark, as you can see here, versus here. And then I picked this MAC Extra Dimension in Lunar Metal because it's kind of a difficult texture to work with unless you have a dampened brush, but I wanted to use it to show how the different fibers being goat and squirrel, handled this sort of baked glitter texture. And then this one is always my go-to, my standard when I'm testing eyeshadows testing eyeshadow brushes to kind of give a baseline of how each brush performs and what I should be looking out and using it for. And then it's no coincidence that most of my favorite brushes work really well with this eyeshadow as a one and done because it just applies it and then there's automatically a shiny part and then the more sunken in edges are blended out to have that darker russet color. So then it looks like I put a lot more work into my eyeshadow when I actually didn't. And this is a Bare Minerals quad. Basically, the reason I keep it is for the matte black color. For when I do use a smoky eye, this is the color that I use because it's not a very concentrated black. It's very layerable, and I can control how much the brush puts on. to intensify the eyeshadow look. The purple's pretty awful. The pink I do like. The white I do like. I don't use them often. So the purple one I did use kind of as a, not as a joke, but as a benchmark for, okay, if you have a good brush, it can still work with a really bad eyeshadow, and this is how it works. The only time I really used it to compare was for the Worker 1 and Worker 2 to show how that the dyed goat hair picks up and places it down right away. So you have less control over intensity and placement, versus with the undyed, it's a lot more controllable and layerable, and it was less patchy. But when it came to blending, this one was a stronger blender and blended out the patchy parts better or faster than the undyed goat hair did. And it was also used for the 5R layering tests. So the synthetic one, this one, applied and intensified a lot slower. I would say probably 35% slower than the 5R Kolinsky did. And then this cream shadow that I picked was because it had dimension again. So you can see kind of like those peach golden reflex. And with the synthetic tan and the natural tan, they both applied it in an even layer, but the natural tan applied it with more dimensionality once I got to the edges and the shadow was thinner and I blended it out. It had more of the blue, base around the edges and the golden on just the thickest parts and the highlight parts, versus with this one, it was kind of the synthetic brush kind of applied an even wash all across. So those are the main differences. That's why I picked the makeup to use that I did. I hope you enjoyed this video, and hopefully I will see you guys soon. No guarantees. This month I still have to move and go on vacation. I'm not sure how that's going to work out, but yeah. Sorry I haven't been here as often as I would like to be. And I will see you guys next time. Bye. And sorry for blinding you all. I haven't seen the sun since mid-March. Like, I haven't exercised outside, so I'm super pale. Tank top probably wasn't the best idea to wear in retrospect. And that's all.